What's up, folks? So today we're going to talk about why are Indians obsessed with FDs and what is this magic of compounding. And even after the magic of compounding applied to our savings and investment, let's say we start saving early and we save a lot, even then it's very hard to just retire at the same lifestyle level, that you have currently while you're earning or when you're about to earn, let alone getting rich, which is another chapter altogether. There's a second video on the series on personal finance. What I have for you here is an Excel sheet, and don't worry, I'll keep the math as simple as possible, and you don't really need to calculate yourself. You can use a calculator here, and you can use the built-in calculator into Excel sheets. I'm going to share the link for this Google Sheet in the description. You can check it out. It just makes it really easy to explain this concept. You can play around with the numbers and see how graphs change. Just copy the file over, make a copy of it, and play around with it. See here is if you put $100 in a fixed deposit, in a bank deposit at the rate of 5% interest for 50 years, how the money grows over time. Initially nothing much happens, but over the span of about 50-ish years, the money finally grows 10 times, right? But it doubles up every 15 years. And as you can see that trend happen in about 50-ish years, your money becomes 10 times. Let's visualize this. This is what compounding is. This is what the magic of compounding looks like. You see this curve kicking in. Eventually, this becomes an exponential curve. And if we were to really extend this far into the future or increase the number of periods of the interest getting compounded, we will see this effect really multiply. So let's put as much money into savings and see what happens, right? It's not that easy. Let's meet a new concept that they should have taught us in school and really explain the concept behind it, but no one bothered because mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. That's his favorite bit to always quote, like, get a new example or something. And this concept is called inflation. What inflation is a concept of supply and demand. When the currency in circulation increases, there's more currency printed, there's more currency in circulation and chasing the same or lesser amount of goods in the market. So you have to pay more currency to get the same amount of goods. How we experience that as consumers is prices rising up. But what's happening in reality is the buying power of that currency, of rupee or dollar or whatever currency you're using, is falling. And you can't hide and run from this inflation. You can't put money under your bed. You can't put it in FD. You can't put it anywhere. Wherever it remains in rupee denomination, it will still face inflation. And that is why gold traditionally has been a very popular instrument of savings for our grandparents, because during their times, inflation was really crazy, even crazier than what it was in our parents' time. What inflation does is it compounds, and every year a certain percentage of the buying power decreases. And what's happening with inflation is the actual buying power is decreasing, and you can measure it. This is actually a measurable number. And every year, the central bank publishes what was the inflation. In fact, it's updated every quarter. So you can take an average of past 5 or 10 or 50 or 60 years, depending on what kind of calculation you're doing. But here, for simplicity's sake, we take 5% inflation. And every year, whatever amount you have, the principal of $100 that you started with and whatever interest you made, it decreases by 5%. If you visualize it, this is what it looks like. Oops. You can see we thought our money is growing, right? Like we should have gotten at the end of 20 years, we should have gotten about $265. We do get $265, but the actual buying power in the future after 20 years of those $265 will be just $95. So we actually lost money. We started out with $100, and now what we have after 20 years is buying power of $95. And this is when the inflation rate and the interest rate is same. We have taken them both to be 5%, and this is the result after that. But we are not done here. Now we must meet our old friend that we talked about in the last video on personal finance, and that's taxes. At least in India, on FD, when you withdraw FD amount, you have to pay taxes unless you put it in a special FD, unless you put it in a special tax exempt FD, which has its own limitations. But in a general FD, you will end up paying some taxation. And just for calculation's sake here, I've assumed 20% tax rate, that whichever year you withdraw in, on the interest you're charged about 20% tax adjusted amount. And you can see after 20 years, what we should have gotten is 265 bucks, but we actually get after paying taxes of 20% is 232 bucks. And now let's apply the concept of inflation on top of that. So we broke our FD, we got the money out, we paid our taxes. Now what is the buying power of the money that is left with us after paying taxes? Of course, as expected, it's worse than expected. Now the buying power from 95, it has been reduced to about 83 bucks. We started with 100 bucks, we're just losing money. What's the point of putting in FD, right? And this is why we can't retire. This is why compounding is hard. In real life, you're not just going to put 100 bucks and forget about it. You're most likely going to be earning for a certain period of time and continue to make savings every year. So let's take a little more realistic scenario and switch from fixed deposit or bank deposit to something called a recurring deposit. And how that differs is, instead of just starting with 100 bucks initially and leaving that as it is for 20 years, every year we add the same amount. Every year we invest 100 rupees more. Assuming again the same 5% interest and 5% inflation, this is what the result we come to. The red bars are the one that is the actual buying power. And we realize the buying power is reducing by still significantly, because as long as they are same, we're going to lose money. We're just going to lose money. I wish it was that was all the hurdles to saving up enough to just be able to retire, let alone get rich. I hope that was it, but there are more hurdles. And the biggest hurdle is, we to assume the rosy picture here of equal interest and equal inflation, 5% inflation, 5% interest. In reality, it's the banks that are giving us all of this interest. It's the central banks giving it to banks and banks giving it to consumer banks and etc., and the chain continues. But even the banks store their value in the currency, which means they face inflation too. Their reserves also face inflation. So they will always borrow money from you below inflation price and always lend it out to you above inflation price. So let's make that realistic change in our sheet. From about 5% inflation to roughly 7% inflation, about 2% above. That's more realistic if you just keep in savings, bank and FD. It's kind of a close enough realistic scenario. And then we go to see the inflation adjustment and we see, wow. So while what we get is about 22 or whatever, and after tax will be something, but the actual buying power of this is 500 bucks. It's like we should have just spent that money, right? And this is why it is so difficult to save. And this is why we must start early. We must start early because so the compounding can kick in. But even just to maintain the money we save, we gotta stay above inflation. And that's why we talk about investment. That's why there's a whole world of finance. And that's why just FDs are not enough. Do a rough calculation quickly, right here. What I've taken here are a bunch of assumptions. This is the average salary as per a source which I will link in the description. This is the expenses I've taken, and I've assumed about 21% saving rate, which is quite high on an average salary, but let's assume that. You will have working years of about 25 to 65. That's about 40 years. And an average lifespan of 100 years and retirement age of 65, which leaves us 35 years of non-working years. But let's add 5 years buffer just for financial buffer, right? So we need to earn 40 years worth of money to live, 40 years without making money in the 40 years that we actually get to work. So how much money is that? How do you calculate this retirement money, or how do you calculate what is typically called fuck you money? Because once you have this, you're truly financially independent. You're not once you have that amount, just the yearly interest will be equivalent to your yearly income. So you can maintain the same lifestyle just on the interest you're making on top of the savings. So let's try to calculate that amount. So here, what is important is the lifestyle is based not on income but on expense. So if you spend more than you earn, there's no hope. But if you spend less than you earn, then let's talk about it. So what we're going to take is multiply our expenses by 12 to get yearly expenses. This monthly is yearly. Take that. And now we know that at some rate, we're gonna So we want to make this amount of money every year as just interest, right? So this is our target amount. Assume again that we're gonna get 5% interest, right? And let's take the same assumption. It wavers around you. It's not that it will remain static, but just for simplicity's sake, let's take the interest to be 5%. What is the amount of which 5% is this? So that's a pretty easy calculation. You take this and you divide it by that. So that's the amount we need, right? And mind you, this is all disregarding inflation. You're not even talking about inflation, right? So how long will it, and we already know how much we are saving each month. So that means we already know how much we are saving each year. So how many years will it take for us to save this amount? Say, if we say 20% of our income, it's going to take 71 years. But most of us, our generation, the longest time saves just 5% or even less than that, which means it's going to take 300 years. If you, and many people just say, just save 10% of your salary and that's going to be enough, but that's still going to leave you with 156 years of saving. When we finally start saving 20%, we get at least close to a human lifetime. But that's 78 years. We don't get working lifetime of 78 years. So on an average salary, how much do you save? So let's take it up to 30%. Is that enough? Still 52 years. Still not feasible. Is 40% enough? Now we are at least in the range, but we gotta add buffer because just to maintain the lifestyle, we gotta add buffer, right? We gotta save 50% to make it actually happen. Yeah, now we are talking about a little bit about, there. But now if you start to add inflation, because if expenses were to remain same, that means you will need the buying power of this much. And we start discounting this, that how much money will you need to be able to have buying power of this much, and redo this calculation, assuming again a inflation rate of 7%, and we come to 468 years. So even after saving 50% of what we earn, because of how inflation works, we can never actually retire. That's why it's so difficult to save up. So is there a way out? Yep, there's a way out. I mean, we also already talked about gold as an option, which civilization has used for the longest time to hedge against inflation. But in today's world, that's not enough. That's where we're going to explore other kind of options. We're going to explore equity. We're going to explore the equation of risk and reward. And we're going to talk about mutual funds. We're going to talk about blockchain, Bitcoin, and everything under the sun. So let me know in the comments if this blew your mind. And again, I have linked this sheet in the description. Make a copy of this sheet. Try playing around with this sheet and see what you can learn out of it. And if you have any question, let me know in the comments and let me know what is the next topic that we should pick up. Do mutual funds charge something? I mean, how do they even make money if you just give them money and they make money and they give you back money? Like, how do they even make money? Let's talk about that next time. And thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.